kailangan dumaan sa tamang proseso. Isang proseso na hindi lamang makatarungan, kundi naaayon at tumatalima sa saligang batas ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Sa mga ganito pong sitwasyon, hindi po naaalis sa aking isipan. Kung may mga pagkakataon meron po bang pagkakataon na maaaring labagin ng Senado ang mga ipinag-utos ng Korte Suprema? Maaaring halimbawa po nito ay kung may klarong panghihimasok sa internal rules o procedure ng Senado ang Korte Suprema. Ngunit, Ginoong Pangulo, sa pagbibigay kahulugan sa nakasaad sa ating saligang batas, tanging Korte Suprema lamang ang may kapangyarihan bilang pinal na tagapagpasya. Article 8, Section 1 of the 87 Constitution expands the Supreme Court's scope of judicial power by mandating it to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government. In the case of Angara versus Electoral Commission, Justice Jose P. Laurel, who later became the third president of the Republic, wrote, and I quote, "When the judiciary mediates to allocate constitutional boundaries, it does not assert any superiority over the other departments. It does not in reality nullify or invalidate an act of the legislature, but only asserts the solemn and sacred obligation assigned to it by the Constitution." Close quote. Noong pong tinatalakay ng ating mga constitutional framers ang probisyon sa konstitusyon patungkol po sa proseso ng impeachment, binanggit po ng kagalang-galang na Commissioner Dodong Maambong ang isang sipi mula sa isang kaso sa Amerika. Ang sabi po niya, and I quote, "Ang impeachment ay ang unang hakbang sa isang proseso ng pagwawasto. Ang layunin po nito ay hindi personal na pagpaparusa sa nasasakdal, bagkos ang pangunahing layunin nito ay panatilihin ang pamahalaang naaayon sa konstitusyon." This quote captures the heart of what impeachment is meant to be, Mr. President. It is not about personalities or punishment. It is about protecting the very structure of our constitutional democracy. And sometimes protecting that structure means accepting limits, even when we disagree with how those limits are drawn. In this case, the Supreme Court, as the final interpreter of our laws, has spoken unanimously, and I will say it again, spoken unanimously, decisively, and with finality. It ruled that the impeachment complaint violated the one-year bar rule. The Vice President was denied due process, and that this Senate, as of the moment, had not acquired jurisdiction. Mr. President, in closing, again, I would say we may not agree with every word of that ruling. But the rule of law is not a matter of convenience. It is the foundation of our democracy. Upholding it, even when it is difficult or unpopular, is what gives this institution its credibility and our democracy its strength. To ignore it, no matter how justified we may feel, is to risk eroding the very foundation we are sworn to defend, our beloved Constitution. Kaya po, Ginoong Pangulo, sa liwanag ng ating saligang batas at bilang paggalang sa pasya ng Korte Suprema, habang kinikilala po natin na may nakabinbing motion for reconsideration na sinampa ng House of Representatives, and in adhering to the immediately executory decision rendered by the Supreme Court, I vote to transfer the articles of impeachment to the archives. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Villar Camil.
Senator Camille Villar is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Mr. President, my dear colleagues, I vote yes to the motion to archive the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte, respecting the decision of the Supreme Court. It is undeniable that the Supreme Court has the power under the Constitution to declare an act of a co-equal body as unconstitutional, a power known as judicial review. The power allows the Supreme Court to ensure that all branches of the government act within the bounds of the Constitution, and it should be respected. The three main branches of our government, the legislative, executive, and judicial, each is vested with distinct powers and functions by the Constitution, none superior to others. Each operates independently with its own sphere of authority and serves as a check and balance on the others to prevent abuse of power. This is the foundation of our democracy, and it ensures the rule of law, accountability, and protection of rights of all Filipinos. In this case, the Supreme Court has spoken. By a unanimous vote, the Supreme Court declared in clear and unequivocal terms the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte unconstitutional and null and void ab initio for violating the one-year bar rule and due process clause. As a result, the Senate did not acquire jurisdiction to constitute itself into an impeachment court. This decision, finally, is immediately executory. Mr. President, we have heard many good arguments in the recent weeks from both sides. Just today, being the youngest member of this robust body, I have learned so much from our esteemed and distinguished colleagues. But to me, it is simple. The opinion, or the most important opinion, is that of the final arbiter of our Constitution, and that is the Supreme Court. Not to adhere to that today. To do otherwise can lead to uncertainty and chaos, and even a conspiracy. And that is why I vote yes to the motion before us. Mr. President, dalangin ko sana na maresolba na natin ngayon ito. Ang mga tunay at malalaking problema na hinaharap ng ating bansa at ng ating mga taas na presyo ng bilihin, pagkaroon ng wastong hanap buhay, kalusugan at kaligtasan ng bawat Pilipino. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Senator Villar.
Senator Villar, Mark.
Senator Mark Villar is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to vote yes and explain my vote on the matter before us, and to explain why we compromised today on archiving this very important topic. But of course, we must always remember that the status quo is that the Senate has no jurisdiction. So in legal speak, this complaint is null and void. Last July 25, the Supreme Court rendered a unanimous decision declaring the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte unconstitutional, noting that it is barred by the one-year rule under the Constitution and that it violates due process. The merits of this decision are not an issue before us. The sole question we need to answer is whether the Senate should respect the decision of the Supreme Court. And I say clearly and emphatically, yes. The Supreme Court has the ultimate authority to interpret what the Constitution is. No one, including the Senate, can substitute its opinion over the courts in any matter concerning the Constitution. And the Constitution itself, in Article 8, Section 1, entrenches the court's role in interpreting the Constitution and determining whether there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction by any branch or instrumentality of the government. This includes the Senate, even when acting as an impeachment tribunal. Justice Laurel, as the final arbiter of constitutional issues, when the judiciary mediates to allocate constitutional boundaries, it does not assert any superiority over the other departments. It does not in reality nullify or invalidate an act of the legislature, but only